Hey, buddy. So I am going to do a think aloud. So this is something that we've done in class before, where essentially I'll model for you how I'm reading a text and what I'm thinking of and what I'm writing as I read. Now I'm going to use the PDF thing that Google does now, and you can do it too in the upper right hand corner. It'll allow you to annotate by hitting the pencil, and you can make notes and then even save those notes. You could use that, or Screencastify does allow you to take notes like down at the bottom here with a pen. You can do that. I like the PDF one because it will save my notes. So, full disclaimer, I didn't read this ahead of time, so I'm doing this organically, just like you're going to be doing. Right, so I'm going to read part of this passage. This is chapter 2 of 1984, where we left off. I'm going to read part of it, and I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking as I'm reading. I'm going to stop at times, underline, write things. At times it might seem stupid, but that's part of what annotating is, honestly, because it's just active reading. So here we go. As he put his hand to the doorknob, Winston saw that he had left the diary open on the table. Already I'm concerned, because we left off and there was a knock at the door, and he's doing something that he shouldn't be. So I'm literally going to write, oh no. My handwriting's not great with this, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be. Oh no, I'm kind of scared here because there's definitely suspense that's happening. Down with Big Brother was written all over it in letters almost big enough to be legible across the room. Some exaggeration here, so I'm going to underline that because that is some hyperbole. It was an inconceivably stupid thing to have done. But he realized, even in his panic, he had not wanted to smudge the creamy paper by shutting the book while the ink was wet. That to me is very peculiar, and I'm going to see if I could change the color here, because this is telling us about his specific character, about who he is as a person, because he knows he's doing something very dangerous, and he's actually very afraid of what's about to happen. And it seems very weird that a knock happens on the door now, but he won't even hide the notebook because he doesn't want to smudge the paper. That just tells you that this isn't just him opening up any diary and start writing. To him, this is a big deal that signifies a lot. Now, the good thing about this is it seems like Winston hates Big Brother. And we've seen that before as well. But the fact that he doesn't want to smudge the ink and he's willing to potentially go to prison or die because of that is very important. So I am starring that because that's part of his characterization there. He drew in his breath and opened the door. Instantly, a warm wave of relief flowed through him. So I'm assuming that it's not who he thought it was going to be. A colorless, crushed-looking woman with wispy hair and a lined face was standing outside. "Oh, comrade," she began in a dreary, whining sort of voice. "I thought I heard you come in. Do you think you could come across and have a look at our kitchen sink? It's got blocked up and—" It was Mrs. Parsons, the wife of a neighbor on the same floor. Mrs. was a word somewhat discountenanced by the party. You were supposed to call everyone comrade. But with some women, one used it instinctively. So that's interesting to me as well because it's showing a difference between the time periods, right? Because why would it be instinctive to call somebody Mrs.? It's speaking back in time potentially to when Winston remembers that that's just how they grew up. You would call an older woman Mrs., assuming that they're also married. But notice too that it's saying it's somewhat discountenanced by the party. I wonder why. I wonder why everyone needs to be called the same thing. It almost reminds me of Harrison Bergeron, and some of you have, so Harrison, I'll say HB. It reminds me of Harrison Bergeron, where everyone is supposed to be equal, and I think that's happening here. She was a woman of about 30, but looking much older. One had the impression that there was a dust in the creases of her face. Winston followed her down the passage. These amateur repair jobs were an almost daily irritation. Victory Mansions were old flats built in the 1930s or thereabouts. I'm going to underline that because it is telling us that these buildings were around even before we were, and were falling to pieces. The plaster flaked constantly from ceilings and walls. The pipes burst in every hard frost. The roof leaked whenever there was snow. The heating system was usually running at half steam when it was not closed down altogether from motives of economy. Repairs, except what you could do for yourself, had to be sanctioned by remote committees which were liable to hold up even the mending of a window pane for 2 years. This isn't too unlike what we see today with red tape. Right? So I'm going to put a little bracket here because this is definitely government red tape. These people are in broken down buildings that don't work, and in order to get a repair, it could take 2 years for a window pane. That is crazy. That is nuts right there, right? That's telling you that this is not a utopia. This is a dystopia. And this is pretty important because I wonder if people are happy. I wonder if people realize, and more than just Winston. Winston had suspicion that O'Brien and some others don't like the party, but you don't seem to know. Everybody seems to be very sneaky or hiding and kind of being very isolated, almost like they're in quarantine because they don't want anybody to know their feelings against the party. Of course, it's only because Tom isn't home, said Mrs. Parsons vaguely. The Parsons flat was bigger than Winston's and dingy in a different way. Everything had a battered, trampled on look, as though the place had just been visited by some large, violent animal. Games impedimenta, hockey sticks, boxing gloves, a burst football, a pair of sweaty shorts turned inside out, lay all over the floor, and on the table there was a litter of dirty dishes and dog-eared exercise books. Seems like there's a young kid that lives here, right? So, young? Like, this just screams there's a child. On the walls were scarlet banners of the Youth League, there we go, and the Spies, and a full-size poster of Big Brother. There was the usual boiled cabbage smell, disgusting, common to the whole building, but it was shot through by a sharper reek of sweat, which, one knew this at the first sniff, though it was hard to say how, was the sweat of some person not present at the moment. In another room, someone with a comb and a piece of toilet paper. Toilet paper, right? I'm just going to underline that because there's a shortage right now. Right? People needing their toilet paper. Was trying to keep tune with the military music which was still issuing from the telescreen. So, someone else is in this room. I have a suspicion that it's a young guy, right? Because it's talking about the Youth League. I wrote down youth before. And the fact that they're trying to keep tune with military music that's still on the telescreen, I'm thinking that this is almost like Hitler Youth, right? That this kid is being indoctrinated in some type of way. It's the children. Oh, there we go. We got our answer, said Mrs. Parsons, casting a half apprehensive glance at the door. They haven't been out today. And, of course, she had a habit of breaking off her sentences in the middle. The kitchen sink was full nearly to the brim with filthy greenish water which smelt worse than ever of cabbage. Winston knelt down and examined the angle joint of the pipe. He hated using his hands, and he hated bending down, which was always liable to start him coughing. Mrs. Parsons looked on helplessly. I'm also wondering right now is why is Winston doing this? What's his motivation to helping even a neighbor in this time? Of course, if Tom was home, he'd put it right in a moment, she said. He loves anything like that. He's ever so good with his hands, Tom is. So she's repeated this a few times, and I'm getting suspicious. I'm now starting to wonder, number one, if this Tom guy, does he even exist? Maybe he ran away. Maybe he left her. Maybe he thinks that she's UGLY, she ain't got no alibi, she's ugly. Or maybe something else is going on. I don't know, but I am confused right now because she's repeated this a couple times. Parsons was Winston's fellow employee at the Ministry of Truth. Okay, so now we're getting some information about him. He was a fattish but active man of paralyzing stupidity. I love that. I want to start using that. I want to call somebody paralyzed in stupidity. A mass of imbecile enthusiasms, one of those completely unquestioning, devoted drudges on whom, more even than on the thought police, the stability of the party depended. The stability of the party depends on what? It depends on stupid people. Very interesting. So I'm going to stop here because I think you get enough of what I'm kind of looking for. Again, some of these annotations are very simple, as you can see, just writing something like, oh no, but it is forcing you, especially when you do a think aloud, it's forcing you to think through what you're reading. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is continue on where I left off. So essentially, you're continuing on page 29 onwards, and I want you to do at least 5 minutes of a think aloud and go through at least one page. So sometimes it might be that you're taking up a lot of space with just one paragraph, and that's fine. You could do multiple videos if needed, but I want at least 5 minutes and at least 3 different annotations and 3 different paragraphs that you kind of get stuck on and you start thinking about.